Good morning. Heard somebody say, I'm the light of the world. Now, when you got up this morning before you had your coffee, did you look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm the light of the world? Okay, if you didn't do that, then you do that in the morning, okay? Hey, how are we doing on the temperature? Cold? Would somebody pick it up? Y'all know what to do. Okay. Okay, so this morning we're talking about this idea of a sacred journey to Jerusalem. So, what do you think of when you hear the word Jerusalem? Just say out a word. What do you think of when you hear the word Jerusalem? What? Jesus? Holy city? Temple? Israel? Hebrews? Sand? Desert? The song Jerusalem. Oh, somebody said it. Resurrection. Give that girl the door prize.
No, it was band leader who was.
Oh, the big.
Give him credit.
Okay.
He knew the answer.
So I'll take a deep breath. The journey to Jerusalem is our journey too. It wasn't just one journey of one man named Jesus. I want us to ponder that this morning. It's not just a nice idea we talk about at Easter time. It seems that more and more of us are getting this awareness that it's an ongoing journey towards something that we are seeking, and just importantly is seeking us. So I want to read to you a moment out of this book that we're using in our book group on Wednesdays. It's entitled, Who Dies? Anybody know the answer yet? Nobody. Okay, Who Dies? An Investigation of Conscious Living and Conscious Dying. It's a Buddhist perspective. And I'd like to read you a story about a man who, like you and I, was seeking his highest good. And so he worked very hard in his life to be a good person, to do the right things, to make the right decisions, that life seemed to be going pretty well. But he was seeking, and he dies, and he wakes up. He dies, and he wakes up. And he realizes, I need to find the place in my book where I'm supposed to be. Oh yeah, there it is. So there's this guy, he walks into a bar. No, that's another story. Okay, there's a story about a fellow who dies, and he leaves his body, and he finds himself in a glistening realm. And standing in the midst of this shining flowers and iridescent sky, he looks all around and he says, wow, I must have been better than I thought. I've gone to heaven. Would any of you be surprised if you woke up and found yourself in heaven? I've gone to heaven. I'm so surprised. And he's looking all around and he thinks, gosh, the only thing that would make this better is if I had a place to live. You know, the biggest surprise is when you leave the body, you realize you continue to live. Everybody's looking. Good, we've got some nodding heads. Consciousness continues. How many of you had a life experience that proves to you that life continues? Your consciousness continues. It's not just a nice religious idea. Okay, so I've gone to heaven. How about that? But I need a place to live. And suddenly, his dream house materializes right in front of him. And then he goes through the door. And he sees all the beautiful decor, the perfect decor that he always wanted, in his dream house that he always wanted. He said, wow, this is heaven. And then he realizes he's hungry. And suddenly, out before him, this long dining table full of his favorite foods, prepared just the way he loves them. They were all vegan, Mark. He had his feast stretched out before us. Whoa, this really is heaven. The only thing that would make it better is if I had someone to share all this with. And suddenly, his perfect life partner is standing right in front of him. Wow, he says, this really is heaven. I'm going to hang out here for a while. This is everything I've dreamed of. I'm just as awed as I can be that I made it to heaven. And then about 6 months go by. And he realizes that he still yearns for more. He still desires more. He wants more windows in the house. He wants a pool. He wants a golf cart. He wants a membership at the golf club. He noticed something even more important. He noticed that with all of these heavenly gifts that have shown up, he still has fear in his heart. He still has frustrations. Still has anxiety. He said, uh-oh, I must not have done enough of my inner work because I'm still dealing with some of these inner places of darkness and foreboding and fear. So I think I need to be somewhere where I can work on these deeper issues. I really need to get back to my inner, deeper work. So I'm going to put in a special requisition. So he goes to the head guy, and he says to her, he says, I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but I feel like I still have a lot of inner work to do because I still have all these fears and anxieties. So can you please send me to another place where I can work on these deeper issues? Actually, I think I'd rather be in hell. So can I transfer to hell so that I can work on my deeper issues? And the head guy says, well, where exactly do you think you are? Bingo! Bingo! So, a lot of us, me included, we haven't figured it out yet. We have moments, we have glimpses, we have awareness, we have dreams, we read it in a book, we go, oh my gosh, that's it. That's it. We are in heaven or in hell depending on how we are perceiving and how we are seeing and viewing and interpreting. And if you've noticed, like I have, it can go back and forth from one minute to the next. But here's what we are doing. This is the season of Easter. We talk about these things, but this is an ongoing story. This isn't something we just pull out at Easter time and say, well, we ought to talk about resurrection. What is happening in our world and in our lives and in our human species? We're pushing through. You know, life is yearning for life. Awakening is yearning for awakening. Higher consciousness, yearning for higher consciousness. We're pushing through. Like this seed, we showed this last Sunday. Seed has to do a lot of work in the darkness to push through. And we do push through to a moment of transcendence, a moment of grace. We have them, don't we? How many in this room have had a moment of transcendence and grace? Every hand should go up, because if we're paying attention, we do have them. But we human beings are very adorable. We forget that our journey is sacred. And for the last 3 weeks, without telling anybody, I've been asking people, what do you think of when you hear the word Jerusalem? And not one person has said resurrection. Until this morning back here, but you said that our illustrious music leader said the word, after I asked them not to, I'm not going to look at him right now, because I asked them not to say. But for 3 weeks I've been asking, what do you think of when you hear the word Jerusalem? Not one person has said resurrection. Why do you think that is? You can tell us.
I don't know about everybody else, but for me, I don't look at the resurrection as Jesus' kind. I look at the resurrection as all of our resurrections and our ascension, and we're all doing the same thing in the footsteps. So I look at what's going on now, metaphysically and in the universe and in the astrology and all how everything's lined up, and I'm all all the energy's changing to bring us out of the third, fourth dimensions into the fifth dimension. Ooh.
Namaste. So, I want us to just take a moment and quietly let this word roll around in us. Resurrection. Coming alive. Expressing the light in the midst of the dark place. And look at it as a tomb or a womb. I propose to you, we're in a womb energy, and resurrection is happening right now, whether we want it to or not. We are on board for awakened consciousness. There's nothing we can do about that. You cannot get off the train. You are on the train. You got on the train when you took human birth. We're here for awakening. This morning we're going to talk about it in terms of resurrection. The word sacred, it means deserving veneration, holy, hallowed, blessed, consecrated, sanctified. There's a good old Pentecostal word. Revered. How many of us speak of our journey in these terms? There are some among us who somebody says, how are you doing? How many of us say, I'm on a sacred journey? I am on a sacred journey of awakening. Hi, what do you do for a living? I am on a sacred journey. I am coming alive. My consciousness is resurrecting to the most high consciousness. Some of us speak of our journey in these terms. I am very afraid of what's going on in the world. Intimidated. I'm alarmed. I'm shocked. I'm nervous. There's things going on in my world, in my country, on my planet that are alarming to me. And so I begin to speak of the journey in those terms sometimes. So I have to reach for the balance. There's just one little letter that's different. We go from scared to sacred. One little letter. So this is what we're pondering this morning, how we're going through this journey. And it will mean a lot to a lot of us in this room if we just take a little bit of time in our lives to ponder this idea that we are on a sacred journey. Nobody has thrust you here to punish you. There is no punishment going on except for the consequences of our own silly actions. There is no God punishing anybody anywhere. Everybody get that? Amen. Oh, good. So Jerusalem, defined as a city or abode of peace. When we think of Jerusalem, do we think of it as a city of peace right now? No. Jesus said Jerusalem would be a millstone around the neck of anybody who tried to wear it. Meaning historically, it's always been a hotbed of chaos and confusion, and yet, out of that, we have a resurrection story. Isn't that amazing? Years ago, David and I were living in Boulder, and we met a Refusenik, one of the Israeli soldiers who had laid down his gun and refused to shoot any more of his neighbors. What if somebody came to you and said, we're going to give you a gun, you have to go shoot your neighbors? Well, you know that's happening in our country. So, a Refusenik, he laid down his gun, he went to prison for that. When we met him, he had made his way to America and is now a U.S. citizen. He stands for peace. Even though he cannot go back to Israel, they will put him in prison because he laid down his gun. There will be consequences if we lay down our warring consciousness. There will be people who tell us it can only be one way. It can only be through war. But there is something in us that reaches for the city of peace. Jerusalem is said to be the place where Abraham formed his alliance with Melchizedek. For those of you who read the esoteric scriptures, Melchizedek was known as the Most High Priest. No one knew where he came from, and nobody knows where he went. So you can decide how that story goes. He was a priest of El Elyon. It was the most high God, in our languaging, the most high consciousness. And that most high consciousness exists in every spiritual path, every religion, every culture. It's not just one culture or one religion that gets to claim that. So here's what Charles Fillmore said about Jerusalem. In the scripture lesson from Daniel, we are told how in the lion's den the prophet kept his windows open toward Jerusalem. Remember the story of Daniel? If you were, how many of you were raised good Southern Baptist? Okay, so we have to tell this story to everybody else. Don't know the story. Okay, you got it. Daniel the prophet in the lion's den, and also in the fire. He and 3 other companions lived through the fire. Well, the idea is, the formula is, he said, are you running it too, Miss Lester? We're having
It was a page
remotes
back.
here, okay. We're told that Daniel kept his windows open toward Jerusalem and prayed 3 times a day. That's what our Muslim brothers and sisters do. And that is the key to the whole situation. Fillmore said, there's the key. That's the key to the whole situation. Jerusalem and humankind is our spiritual consciousness. And what we're pondering this morning is keeping our consciousness open to this idea that we're on a journey towards this higher consciousness. We don't literally have to go to Jerusalem to get the blessings of these teachings, although some will, some do. I know 2 Unity ministers who just did a trek over there. That's lovely. But we're talking about the Jerusalem consciousness. The way Jesus talked about it is this. It is the peace that passes all human understanding. You cannot get the feeling of this peace with only 3rd dimensional consciousness. You got to go to a higher place. We got to go to a higher consciousness. What was it what Mr. Fuller said, or one of these great guys? You can't solve the problem from the same consciousness through which you created it. Who said that? Oh, Einstein. Okay. One of the other big guys. Mayor Baba said it this way. Spiritual awakening is letting go of your fears, your anxieties, and your hallucinations. So we often hallucinate our journey as frightening, as punishment, as hard, as painful. We often define our journey that way. That's from the 3rd dimensional consciousness. Our bodies will ache, our hearts will break. We're in 3rd dimensional consciousness. But we're designed to know other consciousness, higher levels of consciousness. We think development just happens in our physical and our mental, emotional, but there's spiritual development, spiritual awakening.
Most of our work is outside of body. Most of our spirit's outside of the body. The body doesn't hold all of the spirit, so we're connected.
So what is your journey this morning towards Jerusalem? What if, let me just ask you, what if Jesus had this high holy calling to bring the awareness of this higher consciousness into the world, and he's approaching the city gates, the outskirts of Jerusalem, and he pauses. And he says, nah. Nah. Do you think that Jesus had a moment where he thought, I wonder if there's anybody else on the team who could do this part? Do I have an understudy?
I really think if he was in human form, he'd have to have that with that.
Well, we're told he did. He said, Father, what did he say?
Yeah, that.
What if Jesus had changed his mind? Well, in my humble perspective, I think there would have been someone else. There was always destined to be one among us, actually several, but we know about them one at a time, it seems. But some of the beautiful beings of light who would come among us would express a higher consciousness that the rest of us could say, oh, there's a way of being where I don't have to live in fear and anxiety and unkindness. I can live in another kind of consciousness.
That's when you wept.
What? That's
when
why he wept. I know. How many of you know why Jesus wept? Jesus knew our hearts were going to be broken. Jesus knew we were going to have a hard time with it. Jesus knew that there were going to be consequences to taking a stand for peace. There are going to be consequences for taking a stand, as Spike Lee said, to do the right thing. There's going to be consequences. There will be people who tell you, you can't do that. You can't take a stand for peace because it's us and it's them.
So once again, the underbelly is being shown.
The underbelly is being shown. So we're going to keep talking about this and connect the dots, but somebody kick the air cooler now. I'm starting to faint up here. So here's what we're pondering this morning. The journey towards Jerusalem is your sacred journey. It's my sacred journey. It wasn't only the journey of Jesus. And I want us to ponder this. When we think of Jerusalem, why aren't we more often thinking of the resurrection story that happened in Jerusalem? Because that speaks to what we are thinking about in our lives. We're not spending enough time thinking about the resurrection of our consciousness. We're thinking a whole lot about the issues and the anxieties and the sorrows of our human family. I just want us to see where it's going. The end of the story was not the crucifixion. Let's all take a deep breath. Let's close our eyes one. The journey towards Jerusalem, the abode of peace, the consciousness of peace. Speaking to a Muslim neighbor recently, he said, I only learned peace in my religion. My heart is breaking. We are all journeying toward the abode of peace. That is in our consciousness, hidden though it may be for some. If I am living more fully in the abode of peace, then my discernment, my decisions, my choices are more likely to come from that consciousness of peace, rather than a consciousness of fear, manipulation, and control. Let us breathe into this idea. The abode of peace is within us. And that which we are seeking is seeking us. Peace is moving through the dark places to find us just as we are praying and hoping for peace. We take a deep breath into this idea. Don't give up the journey because we're frightened. Keep pushing through the journey because where we're headed, the destination, what we're open to, is peace, peace, peace that passes all human dilemmas. And we say, so it is, and so we let it be. Namaste. Woo! That's the way we talk about that. Okay.